Is the purpose of this video today is to talk about who, what, when, where, why, and how of Portland that's going on right now. Portland is in the national news a lot. And of course, our politics and the many characters of Portland are in the local news a lot. But it seems seldom that any of the, we'll call them formal or mainstream media outlets, really get the story right. So I'm going to make an effort just to kind of lay out what I've seen as an unaffiliated documentarian, journalist, whatever you want to call me, activist too. But I've spent over the last year learning about Portland politics and the people and getting to know them personally and on the street, and the way that things are portrayed in the media with the city government, with the police, and with activists and local gang members is really complex. So first, let's talk about the different groups here. We've got obviously the city government with Ted Wheeler. That has been pretty much a lockstep cabal up until now. We have Joanne Hardesty, a woman from East Portland, a woman of color, who is well known around the state and has done a lot to work for police accountability. So she's a big hope for a lot of people on the Portland City Council that want more accountability and that needs somebody that's not in the Wheeler lockstep cabal that currently sits on the wall in City Hall for city council meetings and looks down upon the masses, judging them quite coldly. So another character in this are the goons that occupy City Hall. That's called G4S. Okay, G4S is private security. That is a mercenary firm out of the UK that does nasty things and imprisons and abuses people around the world. They never belonged in Portland. They certainly don't belong in City Hall. The purpose of having them there, as Ted Wheeler well knows, is to lock the public out, keep dissenters out, be able to violate people's civil rights without being accountable to that because they're a contractor. Their lead person is a person named Dorothy Elmore. She's the head of security at City Hall. She is a disgraced cop from the Portland Police Bureau, threatened to kill her husband, slashed his tires, was the subject of a restraining order. And this is a person that they chose to keep City Hall safe from the public. Again, an ex-cop, right? So everybody's in on this same type of cabal in this Ted Wheeler power grab. We also have Danielle Outlaw. Danielle Outlaw was kind of hand-chosen by Ted Wheeler and Rod Underhill, the DA. She's unqualified. She was never qualified for the job, has never been any part of Portland other than slapping a bullshit stalking order on Portland's only black cop watcher, Eli Ritchie. Eli Ritchie is a cop watcher. That's a person that watches the cops, that films the cops, that does police accountability. She was a police chief. And apparently she was unable to discern the fact that a police accountability activist and a cop watcher might film her in her job as a police chief. But anyway, she and the Portland police have tried to ruin this man's life. Ted Wheeler's in on this because the city actually supported this fraud of a police chief, Outlaw, in filing a very false and unconstitutional and unsupported stalking order and basically making Eli Ritchie illegal in his own city to the point where they entrapped him into accidentally violating the stalking order, and now they want to place him in jail because he stumbled across little police chief Danielle Outlaw in a crowd. She's not very tall, and she popped out, and there she was. So the city wants to put him in jail for 3 years for that because they made him illegal in his hometown, while this person who won't even go on a bike ride or walk the streets and packs a gun claims that she's been stalked. So let's call bullshit on that. She's another character. Rod Underhill. Rod Underhill is the district attorney for Multnomah County. Rod Underhill is a guy that every single time supports the police in their brutality and murders, who never indicts. And now we find out that the Multnomah County DA's office is even dirtier than we thought, because they haven't been filing properly on grand juries. So they actually, because of their lack of record keeping, their failure to file an order of what's called no judgment, whatever. So they failed to file that, meaning there was no record of any grand juries, meaning that they could use multiple grand juries for the same case without going and getting some kind of a court order to do that. So basically the world was their oyster. They could get whatever result out of grand juries, even easier than we already knew they could, because in the Multnomah County DA's office, they just didn't keep the records at all. So I don't know what that means. To me, it means that probably there's a lot of people that got screwed by the system and are continuing to get screwed by the system, while people like Ted Wheeler and Danielle Outlaw sit up there and talk about law and order. And while the city council has white supremacy proclamations and other things that sound nice on the surface, failing to be in the task force for the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So kind of attempting to say that we're not going to participate in the federal police state. But the reality is that here in Portland, the people that are paying the taxes, that voted for the city council, that are doing all these things, those people are having their civil rights violated right now. If they're people of color, they're having their civil rights violated even worse. If they're poor and homeless or houseless, as I prefer to say, then they're getting screwed by the system. And heaven forbid that the Portland police take the life of one of your family members, because the horror of your life will only be beginning. And right now, I've been getting to know Letha Winston, who is the mother of Patrick Kimmons, who was murdered by the Portland police, shot 9 times in the back. And of course, we know the first thing that the police do, just like they do with activists like Eli Ritchie, after they kill somebody, they do character assassination. And they did a real thorough job of that on Patrick Kimmons. Lots of unanswered questions and lots of things to discuss about this case. And of course, the narrative, the police narrative, is really the only narrative that gets out in the paper. The grand jury system, which we just talked about and is a total farce, will come out and they'll give a verdict that they use called, quote, justified. And the other one is a no true bill, not no true bill, right? And so that shows that the jury declined to indict, so they weren't doing that. Anyway, the hell that these families go through after the police take their loved one, they realize that their loved one's going to be smeared. They realize that state murder by police is such a difficult issue that oftentimes friends and family and acquaintances can't support them in the same way that they might have expected if a tragedy like this happened in their life. It just takes your life apart. And the bottom line is the horror never stops, right? From the first time this happens, the way that they're treated by the police and the city, and the farce that's put on by a city that talks about committing to rejecting white supremacy while we have a white supremacist police force. And that's really the bottom line here. We have a police force that inordinately targets people of color, poor, and houseless. We know this, everyone knows this. We have Nazi Mark Kruger. That's been going on for a long time. They just paid off, against the advice of public testimony, including mine, Sergeant Greg, who only 3 days after the murder of Quantus Moose Hayes stated in a morning briefing for other sergeants that there were 3 stages to dealing with intoxicated individuals, leaving the Caucasian ones alone, calling a charity service to take care of the Hispanic ones, and shooting the black ones. And for that, this gentleman was fired. Oh, gentleman, I'm sorry. My apology. For that, this officer was fired. And the city council, with national attention, just voted to pay him off rather than suffer dealing with a court case that would potentially have them liable. And that's also the reason, by the way, that Mark Kruger is still on the force, is that he threatened to sue the city when city employees were talking about his Nazi activities and background. And so what it comes down to is that the city of Portland is chicken shit, and that they'll do proclamations about white supremacy while the full impact of white supremacy is being felt by the public. And again, what we have with Wheeler is a lockdown of City Hall, the subterfuge of hiring a police chief that's never around, never qualified, and acting like there's some type of accountability. And then here we go, 2 years later, reports come from the independent auditor. Man, there's been a lot of bad news for Ted and the cops, that the murder of Moose Hayes and the murder of Terrell Johnson, when analyzed by outside experts, were both just heinous abuses of police force, and totally and showed both of those incidents to be totally unnecessary murders of young men of African American descent. So, again, we have what people say, we have what cities proclaim, what city councils pretend to do to make statements about joining task forces or about rejecting white supremacy in some special way, when in reality, the city itself is the perpetrator. The cops are the perpetrators. The DA is the perpetrators. If Ted Wheeler or any of the city council or the DA or anybody else cared about civil rights, rule of law, or accountability, this whole system would stop, because it's a travesty in Portland. It's a national travesty. And actually, Yeah, Rod Underhill is a giant piece of shit. He really is. But he's a powerful giant piece of shit, right? He's a really powerful giant piece of shit. They can just break the law, and who's going to hold him accountable? Nobody. His office has been breaking the law. Who's going to be held accountable? Who's going to hold them accountable? Chances are no one, especially under the current occupants of the White House. You can bet that cop-sucking state and local level DAs will get all the support in the world to be fascist terrorists. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I mean, Eli has just been screwed by these guys. He was set up as a target by Danielle Outlaw through lies, and then Ted supported it, and that's one of the reasons. Unfortunately, I've never been able to offer Danielle Outlaw even a lick of support, because I met her in person and I told her that I knew that the stalking order against Eli was bullshit and that it needed to go, and that other than that, I'd like to see her success, but that that was absurd. And she and Ted have kept that horror show of abuse of power and a waste of public funds going, using top prosecutors from the DA's office to prosecute a cop watcher for filming a cop that happened to be the police chief. And apparently she thinks so much of herself that she can't even be filmed because she is Danielle Outlaw. So it's absurd. They should all be ashamed of themselves. No, they will not live it down. They've attempted to destroy an innocent man's life, and they're going to be a long way from getting away with this. It's only worked when it was in a bubble, when people didn't know the truth, when the national media and the local media lies and, puts out a story about the chief of police having a stalker. And it's all just lies. It's all just lies. It's made up. And, the police narrative is a powerful one, man. I mean, every TV station will do it. Every print journalist will do it. Now, there's been some really good stuff lately. Some investigative reports. Gordon Friedman, Alex Zelinsky, Kristen Shepard, Karen Shepard from the Willamette Week, investigative reports about how horrible the performance and the behavior of the Portland police have been. Now let's talk about, so that's kind of the city players. Let's talk about the streets a little bit, because I know that one of the reasons Portland is covered so heavily in the media is that we have some gang warfare, some gang fights on our streets. We have a group that people call Antifa. There's a group called Patriot Prayer, and there's a group called Proud Boys. Neither of those has a really big presence in Portland, but both of them are kind of right across the river in Vancouver, Washington. And so they come down into Portland to have their statements be heard. I mean, Portland is the closest big city. Seattle is really quite a ways away. And in many ways, Vancouver serves as a suburb from Portland. So it's not shocking that activists from Vancouver would come down into the Portland area, or, calling them activists. That was actually a mistake. I would say protagonists and gang members. Whoop! Sorry, ran into the wind chime. That's pretty funny. I can't help but pace around talking about this stuff. So anyway, there's those characters, and they get a lot of press, but they're not the story of Portland politics. Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys are not many, and they're not frequent. In terms of the response from the folks that call themselves Antifa, that group has many problems of its own because it's a gang. And the bottom line is, if the police communicated with one gang, Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer. That's not at all surprising because they've communicated with the other gang too, with Antifa and people. There was the same officer, Naya, compromised a protester named June, and she did the same stuff that Joey Gibson was working on, just kind of what they thought probably, or what they portray, I'll say, as logistical details or whatever. People can judge those conversations for themselves, but it's not surprising to me, and it's obvious that police play both sides. They're the house, right? The house always wins, no matter who's putting their money on the table, no matter how Patriot Prayer or any of the groups on the left that might take the gang stance of wanting street violence slice it. There's no real ideological link here other than the fact that these gangs start just kind of hating each other, and then the press and even the local community attempts to kind of assign non-gangsters, community members, including someone like myself, to one of the gang. Now, nobody's really associated me, I don't think, with one of the gangs, because I don't really associate with anybody as a group, or I don't associate with anyone as a group. I'm very independent in terms of what I write and what I say, because that's how I work. But at the same time, one of the groups has threatened me for peaceful action that they didn't approve of, and that side is the side that calls themselves anti-fascist. And so the very important thing to know is that the street gangsters that are running around doing these fights, they don't represent anything ideologically. A lot of them employ what my friend Eli Ritchie taught me to call proxy soldiers. They employ houseless and drug addicted and teens and others to stand there being goons in their name. But these people know nothing about the issues of houselessness or of police murder or of police accountability or of civil rights. They're standing there basically staking out their turf against the people that they consider to be on the other side. And who's on the other side of a gang? Who's on the other side of the gang? That's really the question. And the answer is anyone that's not in the gang, right? That's gang culture. And so if you're in a gang and you call yourself anti-fascist, but what you do is act like a gangster, then you're just a gangster. If you're in a gang and you call yourself a prayer warrior or whatever you want to call you, and you act like a gangster, then you're just a gangster. And if you're a cop, you're just a gangster, right? The cops are just another gang. So what I don't like seeing is that one of the gangs is attempting to capitalize on the other gang having their communications with the cops exposed, because all the gangs suck, in my mind. Violence on the streets between these two groups of protagonists contributes nothing to no one, and is just a pointless grudge match that does not involve people that care about Portland. And I defy these people that want to take war and violence to our streets to explain to me how they are helping protect the people of Portland, because they're full of shit. So I'm just going to go ahead and reject the gangsters, and they're going to have to deal with that. And I think it's important for you and for everyone to know who's who, and not to allow people to play this guilt by association game and try and associate independent people with one of these criminal elements. A good example of that are people called cop watchers. Now, cop watchers may have friends, right? We all have friends. We have friends on different parts of the political spectrum, right? You know, maybe we don't have friends that are Trumpers. You know, I don't have any friends that are big time Trumpers that talk to me about it. But nevertheless, whoever we are, even if you're a complete moron, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to drive you out of Portland, right? That's not an option in a civilized society, to have sectarian violence where we cleanse Portland. And that's actually what these little gangster shits like Luis Marquez have attempted to do, is actually tell people that they don't like to leave Portland. And that's just offensive, right? That's just stupid, because the people that they have told that to don't have a common denominator of philosophy or profile. They're just people that have somehow pissed off the little gangsters. And so, again, let's just call them what they are. If they're little gangsters, they're little gangsters, and you can't be a community leader and a gangster. This isn't a TV show. You don't get to snow us and put on your suit and go look all fancy for the press and then threaten people online, because we're all too smart for that, right? We've all seen the threats. We all know the people that these guys have threatened in public and their heinous behavior, and they're not credible sources. So they're not going to lead anybody into anything. Now, they can go about their business and do their thing. I don't give a shit about them, but when they get called out by the press as, quote, activists, I take umbrage to that, because they are not activists. There are many activists, and they don't need to resort to the gang tactics that are used by these groups. So, what else do we have here? You know, I think that's really probably enough for this video. I think it's better if the videos don't run too long. I didn't have a script, just going off the top of my head, so I hope we kind of covered what you wanted to. Please feel free to send in any questions or comments or whatever. It's okay if you hate me. I don't really care. It's okay. Nobody has to like each other. We don't have to attack each other physically. We can just not like each other, you know, in principle or whatever, I guess. Although I really don't care. I like pretty much everybody, unless they attack innocent people. So peace, you guys. Have a great rest of the day, and hope you enjoyed Portland 101.